Hello everybody, welcome back to my kitchen. This is Your Life, My Hands. And today I have a pretty fun episode, something I've actually never done myself and I've wanted to, so I'm gonna try it today. Be making my own spaghetti sauce. And I mean, a lot of times I would buy like a really good canned one and then, add things to it to improve it. But I've never actually taken the time to make it myself. So Walmart actually had a very nice selection of some very nice tomatoes, and these are going to be rinsed off, washed. I'm going to be putting a small 4-way cut in the bottom of them. And I ended up buying to get these things peeled because you don't want tomato peels in spaghetti sauce. I ended up buying this like big 5-quart saucepan, and it has a steamer tray in it. And these things will be steamed for just a few minutes until the skins, get nice and light, or not light. They like peel a little bit, and it's not going to cook the tomato. It's just going to be able to remove the skin. From there, we'll get the seeds out of it, and we'll make sure we can actually make a sauce. Got some baby portobellos, yellow onion, and a little bit of beef broth, essentially. I know I'm just using Campbell's, but I don't need much of it. And then we're gonna get all this together. I got some meat. We're gonna make some meatballs and make a meat sauce anyways for it. It should be pretty good. More than anything, this is just like a learning experience to try to actually make this thing work. So we're gonna get this thing started. I'm gonna get all these tomatoes prepped, get them into the steaming basket for a few minutes, and we'll move on from there. So I'm not entirely sure, but I was hearing these like little tiny popping noises, and it kind of looks like in certain areas that the top glass piece may be cracking. I'm actually not really sure, so it just did it again. Like I heard one down here. I'm just gonna let this thing cool off, and then I'll rinse this whole thing off and check it out. But I don't know if that's just the water or if that thing's actually cracking. It's a little strange. I'm just going to poke it. That just caught me off guard. I'm really not sure. I mean, brand new pan with a heat shatter resistant lid, which, maybe why you don't buy $20 pans from Walmart, but still kind of strange. I'll let that cool off a little bit. We'll get back to that. Okay, so questionable lids aside, the tomatoes were in there for probably about 5 to 7 minutes. I still hear that thing popping over there. That's really strange. Well, hopefully it doesn't explode for some reason. Anyways, you could tell I have made a little fork, a little crisscross with a shallow cut on the tomato. A few minutes in there. These things look like they've split pretty nicely, and hopefully the skin comes up with some ease. And yes, that's exactly what you should see. You can also boil tomatoes for a very short period of time and get pretty much the same results. This was also much easier, provided your pan doesn't, explode. It's still, I just got it. This did it again. I don't know. I mean, it's always got to be careful anyways when you're working with glassware and you're first heating it up to make sure things don't happen, but, I don't like the sound of that. Anyways, yep, these things peeled nicely, so I'm going to go ahead, get all these things peeled, and then we're going to go into the stage of cutting them up and then actually mashing them and getting the seeds out of it so you don't get seeds in your sauces and stuff. So let me get all these things peeled and we'll go from there. All right, so once your tomatoes have been peeled, which they actually peeled very easily, but probably could use like a second or two longer just to make sure that all the skin would come off. But like 99% of it just came right off. Easy way of doing it. This is more of an experiment the way I'm doing it, and I'm sure there's a very more proper way to do it, but whatever, experiment, So I'm gonna quarter up the tomatoes like so. I already did this with one of them just to make sure it would work, and it seems to be okay. Doesn't yield a whole lot of product, at least the way I'm doing it, and I will be investigating this a little further. So once the tomato has been quartered up, take it. I'm going to kind of break it apart over here. Turn the camera a little bit. I'm going to kind of break it up a little bit over here just to help make it into smaller pieces. So once it's kind of chunked a little bit, doesn't take much, just a little, squeeze, breaks it up into smaller pieces. And the main thing we're doing is we're just trying to catch all the seeds. And we also just don't want plain tomato juice. That's not what we're shooting for here. So there are some harder fibrous pieces in here because this is just essentially a raw tomato. As that's done, grab these other two. Working with wet tomatoes is always fun because they're just a mess. This is definitely more time consuming and probably why every cooking video I see, people just recommend getting a nice quality tomato sauce and not doing it yourself. But for the sake of the experiment, this is how we're going to do it. So, kind of juice them a little bit. Still a whole lot of liquid and fibers and the actual meat of the tomato we're going to try to get out. Definitely, this is, I'm sure, not the right way to do it. I will be investigating this a little later, but this is one way I have seen it do it. And I actually went and got a ice cream scoop also. And from there, through this strainer, you're just going to essentially kind of pulverize everything. And this will help break up all the actual meat of the tomato. And will help start getting it pushed through. And this way, of course, you're going to be left with the fibrous bits, the seeds, and the strainer, and so forth. So this does take a little bit of time, but it did seem to work out pretty well. I actually think they make a better strainer that's actually meant a little bit more along the lines for this, but this seems to be working out pretty good. And honestly, I don't really have any complaints about it. Like I said, I'm sure there's a streamlined way of doing this, or maybe not. Maybe people don't use ice cream scoops, but I found it and I was like, hey, that's a nice rounded surface. I know what kind of strainer I have. This should actually work out nicely. Sure seems to be. So as this stuff kind of starts really breaking down, you're basically juicing this thing and getting as much fiber out of there, keeping all the seeds in. It will kind of begin to stick to the bottom. So you can, I have a spatula here. You can scrape off a lot of the actual tomato meat, we will call it. And that's a good way to get more of the product in there. It doesn't make a whole lot, but that's why I got 8 tomatoes. And I'm gonna keep doing this for a little while until I kind of feel like I've gotten as much as I can out of this tomato. And then this one will be dumped, rinsed, and then the next one will go in. So I have a whole bunch more of these. This is gonna take a little bit of time, but that's kind of how it's working. Don't really seem to have any issues with it. And then we actually get to the less time consuming part of actually making the sauces and meatballs and all that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna wrap this up, talk to you guys in just a few. So essentially what we have now is a very thin tomato sauce. Not even really a sauce at this point, but that's okay. It probably made a couple cups of this, which is plenty for what I'll be working with today. I don't need a huge pile of it. So right now this is gonna stay in here. That process worked fairly well. I believe with the proper size strainer, that it will catch the seeds, but it'll allow more of the tomato solids to come through. So what we're gonna have to do essentially is cook this down a pretty good amount, but we'll worry about that when we actually get to the point of adding this into make a sauce. So for now, I'm gonna get my pan cleaned out and we're gonna brown up some beef, and that'll be the start of the sauce, and then we'll get the onion and mushrooms and all that going forth. Word of advice whenever working with tomatoes and stuff, do be careful, because I'm pretty sure there's tomato on everything around my kitchen, as it turns into an absolute water cannon. I'm sure that this is exactly how they do it at Ragu. So for this particular recipe, I'm going to be using the just ground chuck. Lean ground beef is probably better for this, but I can just drain a little bit of the fat off and boom, it'll suddenly become lean ground beef. A little bit of cost difference there too. Doing those tomatoes took so long that I'm actually going to be trying, because I deserve it, a black and tan Yuengling. I'm a big fan of Yuenglings. I've never actually tried the black and tan, but knowing the history of most of their beers, I'd say it's probably fine. So here, while we're waiting for this to warm up, little taste test. That is actually wonderful. That is a very fine combination between a darker, more deeply flavored beer and they're like normal Yuengling. Pretty tasty if you like that kind of stuff. All right, I'm gonna get this thing browned up and we'll move on to the next step. So the meat is mostly ground, got most of the fat off of there. I'm gonna go ahead and add in this tomato juice, essentially. We're gonna let these start to get to know each other. And it may just look like a lot, but I know that this is going to have to reduce quite a bit. So in this experiment, I'm thinking now, like, it probably would have been wise to like reduce the tomato sauce a little bit first and then add it in here so the beef doesn't get, like, you know, too tough. But I don't think it'll be too bad. Once this thing gets to bubbling, I think it'll reduce nicely. I also, as a backup, I was thinking about it. I haven't used any in a while. I may be able to thicken it up a little bit with some of my dehydrated tomato powder, which I got. And I kind of want to use this stuff anyways. I got, like, it just came in a big old container of it. But I want to see how it turns out. So while this gets to bubbling and simmering a little bit and reduces down, I'm going to start working on the vegetables. They will be cooked in a different pan, and then we'll add them into here. So let's see how that goes. Alrighty. So the sauce is reducing nicely. I added a little bit of that can of the beef consomme. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not entirely sure. But it is reducing down. It is getting a little thicker. So I just thinned it up with a little bit of the beef broth, essentially, but that'll also reduce down. Over here, I have my half a yellow onion. I have a couple cloves of garlic. Some of them are crushed, some of them are sliced. And I just threw in the package of portobello mushrooms that have been pretty finely diced up. And I'm gonna let them release their water, steam out just for a second till everything's looking pretty nice. And that will be added into the sauce. And then once that's all simmering together, we can finally go to working on the meatballs. I was thinking about just kind of leaving these slices of mushrooms, like big slices, because I do like that. It adds a nice texture. However, I wanted to dice them up a little bit so that they can add a little more body to the sauce and help probably thicken it up with a little bit more of them being diced up that way. So I'm gonna let all this stuff cook and then we'll move on to the meatball making. All right, so sauce is simmering away. I'm actually gonna reduce the heat a little bit on that. The meatballs are done. Made a good amount of them. So in this, once again, I like to let people figure out their own, you know, styles and versions and flavors and what they like. This was 1 pound of beef, 1 pound of mild Italian sausage. I added breadcrumbs, a little bit of whole milk, and an egg for binder. And for seasonings, whatever you got, I used some onion powder, garlic powder, black pepper, salt, parsley, chives, red pepper chili flakes. I kind of think that's about it, honestly. Yeah, you make it with flavors how you kind of want them. So these, traditionally, you'll put these in a pan. You just brown them on a couple different sides so they kind of shrink and actually make a shape. Then you throw them into the sauce. I'm actually going to put these into the broiler and just for a few minutes under heat. Actually, hang on, I just remembered. I have my bacon press in here, and we don't want that because that's wood. That will burn. That was fun. From there, these are going to be broiled just for a few minutes till they brown on the top. They'll be tossed into the sauce to finish up cooking. And hopefully by about the time they're done, the sauce thickens up a little bit more. We'll be all set. And we'll go from there. So we're going to see these when they come out of the oven. And there they are. So, pretty much lightly toasted on the top. Put them in the broiler at 500 for just a little bit until they kind of got that coloration looking. These are going to be going into the sauce now. And everything is going to just simmer for a while. I actually don't know how long. Definitely have a little bit of a acidic flavor right now to the sauce. So hopefully as time goes on, that'll kind of sweeten up a little bit. I did mean to buy, and I completely forgot it, a carrot. Because carrot in pasta, or not pasta, in sauces like this are usually pretty good because it can really help reduce the acidic content of tomato. And I completely forgot it. So this one may just turn out to be a little more acidic than I had hoped, but that's okay. So everything's gonna go together. Gonna probably put a lid on it at an angle so that a lot of the steam can vent off. And then it's just gonna cook away and we're gonna see how the flavors change as time goes on. And some good news, after some inspections, the lid was just making some popping noises, but I do not see any hairline cracks in it or anything like that after it was thoroughly dried. So I think I've had this happen a couple times on pots where like the initial cooking of or heating up of the glass typically will cause it to kind of stress a little bit, but it didn't have any issues that I could at least physically see. So here's to hoping glass doesn't explode into my sauce that I've worked so hard on, and because I would probably cry. And there it is, all done. I made some spaghetti noodles. I mean, they're spaghetti noodles. It's nothing to it, so I didn't bother to record any of that. But the sauce is reduced wonderfully, probably almost by twice. The meatballs were really good. I tried one of those. Just want to try one of the final bits of sauce. I added some parsley. I'm sorry, not parsley. Basil leaves in there. Let's see how this sauce comes out. Those flavors have changed so drastically. They were originally a little citric, a little, acidy. And that partially was probably because of a little bit of the dehydrated tomatoes that I put in there just to help thicken it up. But the flavors have just completely changed. It is a sweet, wonderful sauce. The meatballs are really good. I mean, all the vegetables complement each other, and the basil is just a good, really good background flavor. I did kind of skim off some fat off the sides that was building up a little bit. I mean, it is a meat sauce. You're going to get some fat in there, but skimmed a lot of the heavy stuff off, and now this thing is thickened up to the point where I like it. The flavor is phenomenal. I probably could let it sit and it would probably get a little better. Or with these kind of sauces, it can also turn and kind of go bad. So I'm going to call it now and say that it's done. Fantastic. I'm going to look up how to process tomatoes for a tomato sauce, spaghetti sauce in particular, better. But that worked. That actually worked really well. The sauce was definitely thin to begin with. I would suggest, of course, it should be a meat sauce. It should have some onions in it. It should have the mushrooms, because it really just adds a nice body to it and some texture. And then, of course, the meatballs are, they're meatballs. If you like spaghetti with meatballs, then great. Wonderful. Go make some yourself. This stuff is great. Took some time, took some effort, but what a great way to spend a few hours. And my place just smells incredible. So go make it. Wonderful stuff, and I'll talk to you all later.